Hello, welcome back to Theater of My Mind. Oh, it's been a while, isn't it? Let's once again open the theaters now that the pandemic is being declared over, even though it's not, and welcome you to where I regale you with either tales or creations that I have come up with in the realm of tabletop RPGs. Since I'm coming back after a very long time, I wanted to do something a little bit special, and I wanted to incorporate some of the other things I do, some of the individual original writing that I do on the side. A couple of years ago, I started writing stories about a superhero uh, who became a part of a group, a secret group within her city, and began to build her confidence and her capabilities under the waiting wings of that particular organization. These stories are basically referred to as Temet Nosce, which is the name of the organization as well. And you don't have to have read anything about these in order to understand what's about to happen in this show, but I would very much like you to read them, so I'm going to be including the link to my DeviantArt in the description down below. What I'm going to do is I've taken a few of the characters from my story, and I've tried to figure out what they would look like if they were to become D&D characters. So I've gone through and I've built a few of them. I'm going to go through probably a few more after that. Right now I've just got 3 of them built. And we're going to see how they would take shape in a world other than our own. Now, there are a few common rules that we're going to be following here. The first of which is that every single character that I am going to create for the D&D side is going to be either human or some custom lineage that is basically based around human. The reason that for that is the Temet Nosce characters basically live on Earth. It's not our Earth exactly, but like with many superhero stories, it is a version of this planet. So all of the characters are going to be human, largely because the last time that I stepped outside, I noticed there was a distinct lack of Aarakocra in my neighborhood. I know, I'm about as disappointed as you are. The second rule is that some of the items that these characters may have come across might seem odd for them to have for their respective levels. But the reason for that is, and those of you who have already read the Temet Nosce stories already know this, Temet Nosce is a very old organization. They date back to the very beginning of the 12th century in my history. They date back to right after the First Crusade, and actually came as a reaction to the First Crusade, as a way for some of the more altruistically inclined nobles of that time to go, wait, things are getting pretty fucked here. We need to start promoting more altruistic and inclusive ideals in hopes that shit like the First Crusade doesn't happen. Obviously, because it still somewhat follows our history, the other crusades still happened, but, they tried. So, because of that being a very old organization and being run by very rich people, even way back from the 12th century and onward, they have access to resources that you might not think would be possible for someone who's, say, a late millennial in their mid-30s to be able to access. But, it's a thing. Unfortunately, in the Temet Nosce world, much as with our world, rich people have access to a lot more stuff than the average person does. Because what is capitalism if not economic warfare? So, with that in mind, with those 2 major rules in mind, I think it best to start with the very first character, the protagonist of my Temet Nosce stories, if you will, and one who, in very many ways, is basically me. She is like millennial age. She is has had trouble keeping jobs in the past because of various different mental health issues. She has a form of misophonia that does act basically as her kryptonite. The part where she diverges is, for one, she's cisgender female. For two, she's naturally blonde. And for three, she is psionic, which, much to my eternal consternation, I still am not. Let me introduce you to the character who goes by the code name Crimson Talon, but most people in Temet Nosce simply know her as Scarlet Samantha Quire. As far as race went, I went with variant human for her. We'll see what that means in a bit. She is of the fighter class. Subclass is one that I've played before and is a very interesting class to play, if you ask me. So we'll go into that. Stats, very dexterous, quite intelligent, average wisdom and charisma, fairly sturdy, okay on the strength department. But honestly, the strength, it's kind of made up for in other ways. The reason I made her level 8 is because from the last story that I'd written with her, she had really gotten a handle on her powers and was starting to experiment with them a little. But she had not yet really reached kind of the levels of some of the stuff that some of the other characters in the story can quite do. And as I build those D&D characters out, you'll kind of see what I'm getting at. Of course, because she is a fighter, she is proficiency in strength and con saves. Proficiency in intelligence saves, though. Note that interesting little thing. There's going to be a reason for that. 60 HP at level 8, which is round about middle of the road for that. 20 armor class, though. And again, there's a reason why her armor class is really high. Fairly perceptive. Fairly on the ball when it comes to investigation. Insight could be better, you know. As a fighter, of course, she is proficient in all types of armor and shields, all types of weapons, tool proficiency, drum. I haven't gotten to this in the story, but she is a pretty musically inclined individual. I didn't want to have her like play basically the medieval of the guitar, though. She's much like me. She's more prone to like tapping out a beat on the desk. Neurodivergent. Sometimes we got STEM. Celestial, which I kind of flavor as somewhat akin to Latin. And I do use a fair bit of Latin in Temet Nosce. I believe Temet Nosce itself is either Latin or Greek, and it comes from the old saying, know thyself. The long form of which being, know thyself and you shall know the gods. The idea of Temet Nosce is basically trying to foster people to learn their own strengths and be able to use them to help people. Common, which of course just English. Sylvan, haven't quite decided what kind of language that is yet, but there's a reason why I picked Sylvan for some of these characters. It's just not something I got into in my stories yet, so I'm not going to say why. I will say, for those of you who have ever seen some of my takes or some of the conversations that I've had with other people in regards to Highlander, there might be a connection. Right. As far as skills go, pretty decently acrobatic. advantage on initiative and a +4 to it. Noise. Um, First in Arcana, which does not mean the same thing in the Temet Nosce universe as it would in D&D. In D&D, that means, of course, you're trained in being able to recognize various bits of magic. Does not really magic per se in the Temet Nosce universe. Well, I mean, there is this one character, the Dungeon Mistress, who does seem to have the ability to summon people from like distant planets and stars, but it kind of borders on magic, but to my mind, it's not like magic as we know, as we would think of it in the D&D context. Athletics, again, pretty good with that, despite her just average human strength. Again, there's reasons for that. Not very inclined to deception. I try to consider myself a very forthright and excuse me, very forthright and honest individual, or at least I try to be. Scarlet, likewise, not so much. History, not trained in it, but pretty able to pick up on stuff. You know, she's a reader. Insight, again, sometimes they're not a great judge of character. Intimidation, there's actually a reason for this. In the Temet Nosce stories, one of the things that she did with experimenting with her powers was kind of unlock this super mode, which I affectionately call hyperfocus mode because it's kind of derived from a neurodivergent's ability to just kind of lock in and focus on something to the exclusion of everything else. In this effect, it's kind of like a tunnel vision thing where she just focuses on her target and everything else is kind of on the peripheral. When she goes into that mode, her eyes start to glow violet with psionic power. And I can imagine someone who's not used to seeing psionics on a regular basis possibly being scared by that. Investigation, again, smart cookie. Medicine, leaves that to other people. Nature, again, a pretty good reader. Perception, there's a reason why her passive perception is a 15, but her perception score is a 0. And you notice that she's also got advantage in perception. We'll explain why on that later. But yeah, even though she's not very good at reading people, she does keep her head on a swivel, as it were, on a regular basis. Performance, she doesn't really feel like she needs to. For the most part, she's a very upfront person. Persuasion. There's reasons why I gave her proficiency in persuasion. For those of you who are under the age of 18, they are related to some of the side stories that I've written in that universe, and you should not read them because they are not for people who are not adults. Religion, Scarlet, much like myself, kind of falls towards the end of atheism, but it's not out of lack of knowledge. In fact, conversely, it's because she does know, and a lot of what she sees she doesn't like. Sleight of hand, just pretty good because of the dexterity. Stealth, again, pretty good because of the dexterity. I've yet to find an instance in the stories where I've actually had her use stealth. Survival, she's a millennial in the 21st century. Of course, she's only okay at survival. Ain't we all? Okay. Now, before we get into some of the things that she can do, I want to skip ahead to what she's packing as far as inventory goes. Because you might have noticed in this little image up here, there are little wing-like structures coming out. Scarlet does possess some ability to fly. And part of that is some of the class features, which I'm going to get into. But a lot of it is from her kit. So let's go into the inventory and show what I've got here. Of course, she's got some of the basic things, starter items here, but it's the special items that I gave her that are really good. Okay, so the dancing short sword and the short sword +2. I gave her those because her primary weapon is a pair of pattern welded steel short swords that were forged a, by a blacksmith character, codenamed Nakovalo. I used a lot of Slavic for him, whose name is Matej Alexeyev. And he forged pattern welded steel short swords for her because she likes being able to dual wield stuff. So the short sword +2, of course, is just like regular magical sword. The dancing short sword can actually fly about and kind of attack independently on a limited basis. And the reason for that is because she uses, because of her psionics, she can actually like use telekinesis and move things around with her mind, including occasionally her swords. So I think giving her a dancing short sword just felt right for that purpose. Iron Stone of Agility. This is part of why her dexterity is as high as it is. And honestly, I wanted to give her really, really great dexterity because one of the things that her psychokinesis can do is actually give her like little bursts of speed. So the only item that I can come across, at least without going into homebrew items, that does something like that is the Iron Stone of Agility. For Scarlet, it's all innate, but for Scarlet, the D&D character, it's an Iron Stone. Winged Boots, flying speed equal to your walking speed. Can fly for up to 4 hours over the course of a day, either in burst or continuously. Again, this is part of her flight capability. You saw the wings on her there. She actually was trying to learn to use her psychokinesis to fly initially, like as soon as she learned that she was psychokinetic. And she just kept working on that. And she just tried to do that in kind of a base way with just herself and her psychokinesis. And it ended up not working very well. More often than not, it would send her flying in unexpected directions into things like trees and buildings. So she had another character for the Temet essay stories build her an apparatus, which is part of where the Talon name comes from, because it is the, oh god, I cannot remember the exact initialism that I gave it, but it's like telekinetic, aeronautic, telekinetic apparatus for lift and navigation, lift orientation and navigation, or something like that. I don't remember off the exact top of my head what the initialism, what the acronym that I created was, but you know, it's superhero stories. You got to have silly acronyms somewhere, you know. Anyway, that is her flight apparatus, and that is what the winged boots here partially represent. Her ability to be able to use her psychokinesis to manipulate this flight apparatus in order to be able to, you know, give her flight. Sentinel Shield, the same character who made her flight apparatus, Titania Alexeyev, is she's a genius prodigy with electronics, partially because she has electrokinetic abilities. But that's actually one of the D&D characters that I created, so I'm not going to go too far into that because that's for a later episode. But she also created a little disc that can partially act as a shield and partially act as kind of a Xena-esque chakra. Um, that is what this Sentinel shield is for, and that is the reason why she has advantage on initiative and on wisdom perception checks. Because what? Because she has to keep an eye on that, and it also gives her something that she can send out as a surprise. And then Serpent Scale Armor, another one of my D&D characters that I'm actively playing, got this recently. It is a medium armor scale mail, so 14 plus whatever your dex score is, and uh, when you're wearing it, um, it it uses the full dex score instead of just +2. So that's why our armor class is a whopping 20 between the shield and the serpent scale armor. Um, it also doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks, so that's why stealth is just plain okay. Uh, but yeah, I did say I was going to go back to some of her features and her skills, and this is the crux of a lot of where her psychokinetic abilities come in. Because as I previously mentioned, she is a psychokinetic warrior. And because she's a variant human, I went and gave her the telekinetic um, feat as her variant feat for variant human. But she's also just a psi warrior, which has a lot of psychic related things. So her fighting style, of course, is two weapon fighting. Of course, she's got the second wind, action surge, all the usual fun fighter stuff. Martial versatility from Tasha's. But Psi Warrior also came out of Tasha's. And Psi Warrior is a really freaking awesome class to play, I think. For one thing, you have, like some classes have the superiority die. For the psychokinetic, uh, for the Psi Warrior, you get psionic energy dice, which are basically the same thing, and they can fuel various different psionic powers. So there's a lot that you can do with it. For one thing, you can create like a psionic shield. In my mind, this is basically just like Scarlet using her telekinesis to bring the shield in front of her, or maybe like using her powers to like deflect and reduce damage. Again, I've actually played this class, and that is a ridiculously awesome thing to get, especially um, if you like at this level get access to the higher end psionic energy die, because then you can really reduce a lot of damage. Psionic strike, you can propel your weapon with psionic force. So when she strikes, you can put a little extra mustard on it to get a little extra damage in it. Again, a portion of her psychokinesis, or using that to give her a little extra burst of speed, a little extra force into it. And telekinetic movement can move objects or other things like 30 feet at a time. In other characters that I've played that use Psi Warrior, I've actually used this to help lift people out of precarious situations. So it's a very useful thing to do. And then, of course, every short rest, if you feel so inclined, you can get one of those dice back. So, but because she's fairly high level Psi Warrior at level 8, she's got additional things that she can do. in addition to the telekinetic feat that she already had, where she can push things up to 5 feet if they fail a strength saving throw of a kind. She's got telekinetic thrust, so she can make someone go even 10 feet further, so she can push him back or slide him to the side or knock him prone. But she can also gain a flying speed of twice her speed for basically one turn, which is just an extra little boost over the flying boots, because the flying boots, she's got 4 hours of just like normal flight the whole time. This is basically your leaping tall buildings in a single bound kind of Superman shit. Get an extra burst of speed there, and it also runs off of side eye. So once you use the side power leap once, you get extra opportunities at that. And with the psionic recovery that you can do once per short rest, you get even more opportunities to do that. Plus this recharging at a short rest. So you can do this a lot over the course of the day, and it's really great. So in addition to the telekinetic feat that I gave her, which basically gives her a free mage hand, I gave her resilience and intelligence, just to boost her mind a little bit more for the sake of the psionic powers. Of course, she's dual wielder, so she gets an additional +1 bonus to AC when she's wielding a weapon in each hand. So, even if the shield weren't equipped with her 2 swords, she's still got a 19, which is pretty doggone good AC. And the athlete score, which I think I used to boost the strength score from a 9 to a 10 just to make it even. Yeah, I know. I'm a min-maxer sometimes. I don't intend to be. It's just a thing that happens sometimes. But this also, main reason I gave the athlete feat is because it gives the ability to be able to stand only using 5 feet of movement, so you don't lose movement. You don't lose movement for climbing, and running jumps get a shorter run up. So, again, I figured that went along with the telekinetic powers on her. But yeah, that's really just the long and the short of Scarlet. Aside from kind of her personality, again, a lot of her personality is based on me. So she likes to do as much as she can, like head on, as soon as possible. She does care a lot about Avadelphia and the people that are there, because it's probably the first city where she's actually felt like she could be herself, and more importantly, that her girlfriend Anna Descartes could truly be herself as a trans woman. I kind of split myself between those two characters in some ways, and yeah, that's the long and the short of Scarlet in this, guys. If you want to know more about Scarlet as a superhero, again, my DeviantArt page is going to be in the description below. Don't be discouraged by the name of the website. There's not a lot of deviance going on there, unless you see a blatantly and openly socialist trans woman writing stuff that is kind of inspirational fiction for herself as being particularly deviant in nature. But that is Scarlet Samantha Quire. Come back another time. We shall do another one of the characters that I have built from Temet Nosce. For now, I welcome you to the theater of my mind. The show is over. It's time to take a bow.